Hello! Today I'm going to be sharing all the books that I read in March. But before I get into that, just a quick little note. Someone commented saying that I should get a mic, and I got a mic, I swear to God, it just hasn't arrived yet. And I've also pre-filmed a couple videos, so the next month I won't have a mic, but after that, I'm gonna have a mic, and my sound quality will get much better. Just an FYI to anyone out there. But let's just get into the books. The first book that I read in March is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, I don't know. This is a hard book to describe. It follows two main characters. One is Marie, and she's living in Paris when the Nazis occupy it. Her father works at the Natural History Museum, and there's this special gem there. And when the Nazis occupy Paris, the museum makes 3 different copies of this gem, and then they send it to different people so no one knows if they have the real one or a copy, and these people disperse. So Marie and her father go to a different town to live with his uncle, and then it's also following, what's his name, Werner, who is living in Germany, and he's joining this like Nazi education camp. I thought that this was an entertaining book, but it won the Pulitzer Prize apparently. Did it? I swear to God I saw something saying it won the Pulitzer Prize. Am I wrong? I don't know. It's not Pulitzer worthy, so if it didn't win, it didn't deserve to win. But I saw one review on Goodreads saying that this book is like World War II PG-13 version, and I completely agree with that. I had a hard time connecting with the characters, especially Werner. He just felt very flat, like all he cared about was like building machines. And they didn't really explore, like, he's in a Nazi camp, but he's just like, not a camp. He's in a Nazi school, but he's just like indifferent to all the violence that's happening around him, and I wish that Doerr had kind of explored the morality of it a bit more. I don't know, like I see why this is a popular book, I see the mass appeal, but I've also read so many World War II books by this point that it just does not stand out. Oh, how many stars did I give this? I gave this 3 stars. After that, I picked up a much harder book to describe, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm gonna do my best, but I'm gonna give a terrible description of this book because it's just, there's so much happening that I can't figure out how to describe it. So essentially, you're following the Atreides family, who was given control over this planet called Arrakis. Arrakis is known for its like spice, which powers like intergalactic travel and a whole bunch of other shit. It's really important, but it's like this desert planet with this spice, but there's also like earthworms, like these huge worms that make harvesting the spice an issue, and there's also the native people of this planet, which are called the Freemen. So essentially, Duke Leto comes to Arrakis with his son Paul and his consort Jessica, and eventually he is betrayed, and Paul and Jessica flee, and they're just like out in the desert trying to figure out what the fuck to do. That was like a bad description, but I think you get the gist. If you've seen the movie, book 1 covers both movie 1 and 2. So if you've seen the first movie, then like you get the initial setup of the book. And honestly, this book is just a beast. Like that's the best way to describe it. It's so complex, there's so much going on, it's so imaginative, and the world building is crazy, like it brings to mind Lord of the Rings for me. But then at the same time, you can kind of tell that Herbert's skill didn't really line up with his imagination. Like the writing isn't spectacular. There's definitely times in here where he's like switching perspectives in the same scene, which is clunky and confusing. And the world is just like so expansive that it's hard to keep track of minor characters. Which I think is also a product of his writing, because for instance in like Game of Thrones I had no issue with that, but in this book it's like it was very hard for me to keep track of basically anyone who weren't like the main characters. There's also certain reveals that could have been done much better, that the movie for instance did much better, like Paul's lineage, and Chani in the movie is so much better than Book Chani. Book Chani is a very flat character, just like fawning over Paul, whereas like movie Chani is so strong and fierce and independent. She's a much better character. So like I will say the writing of the woman isn't like spectacular, but what do you expect from a sci-fi book written in the 60s really? And at the same time, these faults didn't really affect my enjoyment. I still really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. After that, I picked up Death Valley by Melissa Broder. I was so excited about this book. So essentially this book follows our main character whose name I can't remember. I don't think it gives her name. It just says a woman. So I don't think her name is is ever revealed. So it's justified that I don't remember it. But it follows this woman who is checking into a Best Western. Her father is like sick and dying. Her husband is chronically ill. And she's just got all this stress on her shoulders. And she goes to Death Valley Park and is taking a hike there when she finds this like big cactus. And she slips inside of the cactus, and in there she sees a younger version of her father, and she starts talking to him. I was so excited by the premise. I was expecting this really weird, really surreal book, but unfortunately the cactus takes up maybe like 3 scenes, and the bulk of the book is just her getting like lost in the desert, and her feelings on her father and her husband. And not to say that like a father dying or like a chronically ill husband aren't things that could be like explored in interesting ways in a book, but I just think in this book all the characters felt really flat. None of them felt fleshed out at all. I wasn't really invested in them, and it was just kind of boring at the end of the day. So this was a big letdown, honestly. But I will say, I think I would give this author's other books a chance, because it seemed from the Goodreads reviews that this is like the worst of them. And that the other ones are much better. So there's that. I gave this book 2 stars. Next, I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman. This book takes place in a world where they have conquered death. They've actually conquered like everything bad about humanity. They created this AI that has made society perfect. But the issue with conquering death is that the population just keeps rising and rising. So they created this community of people called like Scythes, and their job is to go and like kill people to keep the population levels down. So you're following 2 main characters, a boy and a girl, Citra and Rowan, and they were chosen by a Scythe to be apprentices. So they're getting like a first-hand look into this world. I think this book just wasn't for me. First of all, I didn't realize at first when I bought it that it was YA. Probably would not have bought it knowing that. I just don't read YA anymore. I just don't really like it that much anymore. The romance between the characters also felt really forced. Like they had no chemistry, and there's nothing like building any tension between them. All of a sudden they just like loved each other, and I hate that in books. I also found the idea that like AI made the word perfect to be really cringy and juvenile. Especially like in the context of today when we actually have AI and it's actually doing like really terrible things. And then at the end of the day too, I didn't like how black and white this book was. Like the bad guys are so obviously bad, the good are so obviously good. There's just no gray area, which I think would have been much more interesting to read about. And even though the book picked up towards the end, for most of the book I was really bored. Like I think the idea of conquering death is really cool, I just didn't like the execution here. And I gave this book 2.5 stars. Then the next book I picked up is Dune Messiah, which is the 2nd book in the Dune series, also by Frank Herbert. Ow, Sophia, you're hurting me. So I can't describe what this one's about, but you got the synopsis from the first one. This book, everyone on Goodreads seems to hate. And I kind of understand why. I think the first Dune book is just packed full of so much action, there's so much going on, it like keeps you wanting to read. And this book is much less action, much more like introspection, much more like looking inward and dealing with psychological stuff instead. So it's a much slower paced book, and not as much happens. I do think the introduction of some new characters was really interesting and like added a lot to the story, but ultimately the main thing I need to Sophia, please stop. She's here and she doesn't want to hear about Dune at all. The main thing I need to talk about is the female characters here, because my god did he do an awful job with these female characters. Like Lady Jessica, who plays a big role in the first book, is just gone. She just totally like pieced out. Chani sort of has no purpose other than reproduction. I don't know how to say her name. Irulan? She seemed like she'd be a major player, but she was just obsessed with the idea of having Paul's kids. And then the worst person in the entire book is Arya. That's how you say her name, right? No, Alia. Alia? I'm gonna say Alia. Aaliyah. It's probably Aaliyah. Good. This is a good use of time. Aaliyah is just the worst of all. She's 15 and she's so horny. Holy shit. It's all she thinks about all the time. And she's just too young for that. I don't care if she has all of this knowledge or whatever. Like, it's creepy that a grown man wrote a 15-year-old girl like that. I did not like that part at all. At the end of the day though, I am still interested in the series and seeing where things go. I heard that the series just gets like weirder and weirder as it goes on, but to me that's a good thing. I like that. So I did pick up Children of Dune, and I'll pick it up shortly, but I gave this book 3 stars. Next, we have Monstero by Geraldo Simano Cordova. This book is so cool. Okay, so basically, in the opening scene, it follows a mother and a father, and their son is dead. He had just died, and the mother, in her grief, tears open his body with a butcher knife and hacks off a piece of his lung and puts it in a jar. From there, she starts feeding the lung, and the lung turns into a little monster that she calls Monstero. I don't even have words to describe this book. Like, my Goodreads rating literally just says, so weird, so brilliant. And that's exactly how I feel. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I don't even know what to say about it. I just thought it was great. I just thought it was like a perfect book. Just like the depiction of grief, like you start to care for the characters so much. I have no words for this. This is all I can say. Just like a shrug of the shoulders. I just loved it, and I think everyone should read it. Then we're down to the last 2, and these 2 are part of an upcoming video, so I'm not going to give you my thoughts on them or my ratings. I'll just quickly summarize what they're about. The first of them, these books. First one is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This book is a dark romance retelling of Captain Hook and Wendy. That's all I'm gonna say, just that it's a reimagining, because I can't even get into the details of this book. There's just too much there. And the last book I read in March was Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. This book follows our 2 main characters, Michael and Erica. Erica has been obsessed with Michael like her whole life. She's in love with him. He is the older brother of her ex-boyfriend. And Michael has a very close-knit group of friends that he's convinced Erica has betrayed. So he makes it his like life goal to ruin her life. This is also dark romance. Hint, hint. So those are all the books I read in March. Let me know what books you read down below and what you thought. I'd love to hear. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Goodbye. And hopefully that video will have a microphone. It won't, but soon it will.